Yeah, I was wondering how the people in the government can take such time and care in setting up programs to spy on Americans, but not take time to open a basic physics book and realize that the 105 feet of acknowledged free fall of Building 7 on 9/11 would be impossible unless explosives were used to bring it down.
What's your take on it?
I don't buy into a conspiracy theory on 9/11 where some inside job took down the Twin Towers. But with regard to the NSA, there's a lot of us who have many concerns about the NSA program.
Thanks for having me. Building 7 was in free fall for over 100 feet when it was destroyed on 9/11, meeting no resistance for 8 stories as it went down. Given this fact, why hasn't Congress forced the National Institute of Standard and Technology to legitimately explore the possibility that explosives may have been used?
William, we'll get a response from the congressman from that issue, but what do you think about immigration reform? You're in Houston.
Well, my question was about the Building 7 and 9/11.
I know, but I'm asking you about what you think about immigration reform. We'll move on to that in just a minute.
Well, immigration reform would start with labor reform. Right now, we have a system that condones illegal immigration. But back to my original question, please.
Well, let me go back to the immigration reform since we're on that particular topic. Keep in mind that, for example, in the state of Texas...
So I've heard this comment that, you'd need explosives inside the buildings to bring them down. I just, I don't want to spend time on this question. I don't think it's valid.
Thank you. And I agree. We've had that question posed many times before. Hopefully that will be the end of it.
If there are any big efforts by al-Qaeda to move in the future, to make sure that the Afghans and us and the Americans, that we have enough capability to go after them quickly, prevent a return to what we saw in the period right before 9/11.
On the Republican line from Vernon, New York is Andy. Good morning. Thanks for waiting.
Good morning, Steve, and thank you for letting me join the weekly war pep rally here. I heard you dismiss a caller earlier, and you're talking about 9/11. The problem is that Building 7 was in a free fall when it was destroyed for over 100 feet when it was destroyed. That literally means you have to erase 8 stories. So, factoring this in and trying to justify all these loss of troops over the years, can you please just use your own common sense and tell the audience how you think that's physically possible, or are you just going to tell them that physics is a conspiracy theory and show more disrespect for their intelligence?
I'm going to say that I know a lot of people at the CIA, and it's a disrespect to them to think they would ever be complicit in an attack against American soil. I find the theory ridiculous, and I'm not going to indulge it further.
Let me put
plans in the exchange.
All right, well, let's turn to Scott. He's up first in Cortland Manor, New York, a Republican caller. Hi, Scott.
Hi, how are you?
Morning.
Morning.
Good morning. A wonderful morning to both of you. My question is concerning credibility of Congress in all of this. What credibility does Congress have left to govern with when basic physics has already proven that Building 7, World Trade Center 7, was brought down by explosives on 9/11, and the majority of congressmen are either willingly ignorant of this fact or can only offer rehearsed outrage in response to direct questions about this evidence?
Well, I think Congress's credibility has suffered quite a bit in recent weeks with the shutdown of the government. And one thing that we can do about the issues you raise and all of the other issues, we can start working together for example, to make the Affordable Care Act work. If there's allegations around the World Trade Center, to investigate those fully. And people really need to start working together in a bipartisan way for the good of the country. I really believe that.
Ruth is next. Lansing.
3880, Independence 202-585-3882. Mike is on our line for Democrats from Newport, Kentucky this morning. Mike, good morning.
Hey, good morning. Thank you for taking my call. The National Institute of Standards and Technology admitted that Building 7 was in free fall for over 100 feet when it was destroyed on 9/11.
Mike, we're talking about women's issues and with Lauren Williams, a story editor from Mother Jones. Do you want to talk about that subject with us this morning?
Yes, I'm very interested in Mother Jones covering this story. insults and personal attacks from the corporate press on those who talk about this scientific evidence doesn't make the scientific facts go away. Would Mother Jones consider writing a fair and balanced article covering the over 2,000 architects and engineers who are simply seeking a real investigation into Building 7's destruction?
Lauren Williams, a subject that you edit on at Mother Jones?
No, I think Mike from Kentucky missed his chance earlier when our Washington bureau chief David Korn was on. It's above my pay grade.
What are some of the other...
To bring immigration to the floor?
Let's go to your call, starting with Loretta in Middletown, Connecticut. She's on our line for Democrats. Go ahead.
The safety of Americans is a job that you seem to take very seriously. And if that's true, how can you ignore the thousands of architects and engineers who've demanded a real investigation of why Building 7 fell on 9/11? Since there's overwhelming evidence that pre-planned explosions... I have a question about Building 7, and I just asked it, and I'd like to hear the Congressman's response to it, and I'll take my answer offline. Thank you.
You here to respond?
On Building 7?
She had a question about 9/11 this morning.
9/11 from what standpoint?
I think her question was about an additional building falling. Obviously, you can decide whether or not you'd like to respond.
I'll answer the question offline. I wasn't.
All right, next let's go to Jim in Tustin, Michigan on our line for Republican.
And we're going to begin with a call from Adam in Huntington, West Virginia on our Democrats line. Adam, we've been talking with Alex Seitz-Wald of the National Journal about whether or not the Constitution should be rewritten. What do you think?
My question is, why should America swallow the agendas that pundits try to sell them when the media has already betrayed the people by staying silently obedient on the issues of Building 7 and the overwhelming scientific evidence proving that pre-planned explosives brought it down on 9/11?
Thank you, Adam. And we'll move on to George in Normal, Illinois on our Republican line. George.
Monitoring the phones of our allied leaders. Rich, you're up first in Milton, Massachusetts, Republican caller. Rich, go ahead.
Thank you. You've written much about America's decline. Since collectively looking at ourselves in the mirror and facing reality as a nation is the only way to make our country great again, isn't it time for members of the Council on Foreign Relations to face the scientific evidence proving that World Trade Center 7 building was taken down with explosives on 9/11 and demand a real investigation of its destruction?
Mr. Kupchin, do you have some thoughts on that?
Well, I'm actually not someone who believes in American decline. I think the best days of the United States are probably still ahead of it because we have immigrants, we got the best universities, we've got the best entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial capital. But I do think the world is changing in a way that we as Americans need to debate. On the 9/11 question, I don't sign up to the conspiracy theorists. I think those attacks were carried out by dangerous extremist militants of the sort that this NSA espionage is actually focused on stopping. And we know that Homeland Security, that spending on intelligence went up after 9/11, and we know that a lot of attacks have been prevented. The British just had a parliamentary investigation a few days ago, and they said that they have 35 concrete attacks that have been stopped in London because of this kind of surveillance that the British and the Americans have been doing together.
Let's go to Andrew.
And to continue to serve.
Michael Newton is the Program on National Security Director at the Foreign Policy Research Institute. We're talking about the civil-military divide, taking your calls and comments. Clayt is up next from Eau Claire, Wisconsin, a Republican. Clayt, thanks for calling in.
Hi, I'm a veteran who served in both Afghanistan and Iraq, and I stand in solidarity with the thousands of building experts who are demanding a real investigation of why Building 7 fell on 9/11, as do so many other veterans. Why aren't you or your magazine covering the scientific evidence proving that Building 7 was brought down with explosives on 9/11.
Hey, Clay, we're talking on Veterans Day today about the civil-military divide with Michael Noonan. Do you have a question on that topic? No? We'll go to Robert from Frost.
Are those drones armed? We don't know for sure.
Absolutely. Let's take one of your calls now. Let's go to Rick in Atlanta, Georgia, on our line for Democrats. Go ahead. Rick, are you
wondering that? Yes, I was just wondering that since so many innocent people have died in the war on terror, can you explain to future generations who may be watching at this time in history why journalists refuse to dig deeper about Building 705 feet of free fall 9/11 and the impossibility of its destruction unless explosives were used?
Regarding the larger and long-standing debate about 9/11, I think we can get into that in a few minutes, but really quickly, one of the things that the caller brought up is the number of people, civilians who've been killed in the war on terror era. And that's one of the things about drone technology that has really been focused on by the mainstream media at this point, and as well as a number of leading human rights organizations around the world, which is that the United States has carried out drone attacks in the Afghanistan-Pakistan border region where an unknown number of civilians, hundreds of civilians, if not more, have been innocent women, children, have been killed by these strikes targeting suspected terrorists. And this is something that, when you get back to this precedent set by the United States, is very disconcerting, because we can sit here in Washington and say, oh, well, we got our target, so, hey, it was collateral damage. But if we're looking at another world capital where, say, Moscow does a cross-border drone strike into one of the former Soviet republics, say, after an international suspected criminal, and dozens, if not hundreds of civilians are killed in that strike, how are we going to respond? Are we really prepared politically and mentally, after having done that ourselves, to respond to that type of a scenario?
Absolutely. Let's take more of your calls. Next with Adam in Lititz, Pennsylvania, on our line for Republicans.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks, guys, for doing your story here. Well, I'd like to second, I guess, that motion on Building 7 from our previous caller. But moving right along, I would also like to say I'm glad to hear you talk a little bit.
Radio down, but I promise we'll try to come right back to you. Let's go ahead and move on to Michael in New Orleans on our line for Independence.
Yes, good day. I would venture to say that when I was a young man, this is some 50 years ago, there were about 65 independent news networks. Today there are 5, and all 5 of them are basically owned by the same conglomerates. You do not, repeat, do not get any truth on mainstream media. And I will give a case in point. There are callers that call in every day to you about the World Trade Center 7, WTC 7, falling in free fall at 6 seconds. Anybody with 2 functioning brain cells and an internet connection can see that there are huge questions about 9/11, yet you will not have one single mainstream media source look into this blatant smoking gun that 9/11 was an inside job. You continually obfuscate or paint the people that are just trying to get simple answers as, conspiracy theorists. The conspiracy theory lies in our government.
Well, thank you so much, Michael, for your call, and did want to note that we did have a discussion about that this morning with Guy Taylor of the Washington Times. We're going to try to go back to Harold.
Could be embraced, perhaps by both sides.
All right, let's get to phone calls.
Sure.
Daryl's been waiting in Buffalo, New York. Republican caller. Hi, Daryl.
Yes, hi. Thank you for taking my call. Can you please explain, Charlie, to viewers why people in Congress are ignoring the obvious evidence that Building 7 was brought down in a controlled demolition on 9/11, and why they won't simply call for a new investigation of its destruction without pointing any fingers at any party, just to address the technical aspects of the issue?
Okay, Daryl, it's not our topic for today. Let me preface his, before you respond, that there's an organized effort to call into our show to talk about what happened on 9/11. Some from from some folks, that don't trust the government and the explanation of it. So go ahead and respond.
Well, sure. Well, first I want to say my cousin Steve McIntyre was in the North Tower on 9/11. He was on the 91st floor. He escaped. He was on the highest floor of anybody who escaped the first tower that was struck by one of the jets on 9/11. So I'm very much interested in this issue. I've served on the Homeland Security Committee. I will be happy to look at the issues of surrounding Building 7. We certainly saw the North and South Tower go down shortly after the strike. I'd be happy to take a look at the Building 7 issue, but believe me, I am very much concerned about what happened on 9/11. We're all deeply affected by it, and I'd be happy to look at the Building 7 issue further.
Here's a tweet from
the insurance they have today.
Susan's next. Houston, Texas, Democratic caller.
Senator, one of your most important jobs is to look out for the well-being of Americans. How can anyone in Congress claim to be doing that when they willfully ignore the expert opinions of thousands of architects and engineers who are demanding a real investigation of why Building 7 fell on 9/11, since there's so much evidence that proves that pre-funded explosives destroyed it?
Susan, well,
I don't think I've heard that one before. I hear your concern. I know there's been a lot of investigations done on the 9/11 attack and on the consequences of the way the World Trade Center was constructed. But I have not heard any. I haven't seen any credible evidence to the allegations that you've made.
And there's a group out there that believes that the government did not do a thorough investigation of what took down the towers on 9/11, an organized effort to call into this show to ask folks like yourself, members of Congress, about that investigation. We're talking about healthcare this morning.
More audits and more work going after those people.
Carrie's next. Lafayette, New Jersey, Republican caller.
Yes, thanks for taking my call. Listen, Congressman, the last time you were on this program and you were asked about Building 7 and the free fall on 9/11, you eluded the question. Can you please give me a straight answer as to why we should not have a new investigation of Building 7's destruction?
Congressman Sure, Carrie. Congressman Cuellar, we have a group of people out there who distrust the analysis that was done on 9/11, and they are organized and calling into our show to get members of Congress and other people to talk about the issue.
Well, first of all, I think she probably meant somebody else because I don't remember being asked that particular question. But anyway, to answer the question against 9/11, it's one of those things that have been investigated. There's a lot of analysis has been done, a lot of investigation has been done. But again, we know even a war got started because of 9/11. So I think that work has been done. But if there's any new evidence, of course, certainly the feds will be interested in that.
Stephen, in Hinckley,
not what she needs to buy for herself.
We'll go to our line for Republicans. Steve, in Cincinnati.
Senator, there's overwhelming evidence that proves that building number 7 was brought down with explosives on 9/11. This isn't about politics. It's about facing scientific reality and finding out what really happened. Would you support a new investigation of Building 7's destruction on 9/11?
I'm not exactly sure what he.
Well, let me give you a little context here. There's a group out there that doesn't believe that the government did an adequate job investigating what really happened on 9/11, and they are organized. They call into shows like ours, expressing their First Amendment right, democracy, and challenging members of Congress like yourself to answer the investigation. Do you think it was thorough enough?
Oh,
the
9/11?
9/11 investigation.
Yes.
Okay, move on. Fred, Springtown.
Coming across the border, we don't know.
Our guest is Stephanie Castro of the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Eddie, Utica, New York, Democrats line.
Thank you. The defense and security establishments are making America less safe by refusing to address the mountain of evidence that Building 7 was brought down with pre-planted explosives on 9/11. Now, without dwelling on who was responsible or pointing fingers, would members of your organization be willing to meet with the representatives of the thousands of architects and engineers that are demanding a new investigation of Building 7's destruction to view the evidence and figure out who got explosives into Building 7?
So my organization is a nonprofit think tank here in Washington. We do work on contracts and with grants for the government as we do for foundations and others. I would say that I would be willing to speak with you all about what perspective that you bring to the table. So I'd be happy to.
Pine Bluff, Eric.
People working around the clock on this.
Let's go to your calls now, starting with Kevin in Bainbridge, Ohio. He is on our line for Democrats.
Good morning, Congressman. Thank you for your service to America and its people. Thousands of building experts are demanding a real investigation into why Building 7 fell on 9/11, and there's overwhelming evidence that proves it was brought down in a controlled demolition. Are you aware of this building's destruction on 9/11, and if not, would you be willing to personally review the evidence of its controlled demolition? And
I'm not sure that's a healthcare question, and I'm not quite sure what the caller is referring to, but it's not something that we're looking at in Congress today, as I understand.
All right, let's talk now.
Behind.
Next up, Michael, Spring Hill, Florida, Democrats line. Good morning.
Hi, how you doing, sir? I have a question for you. Why should soldiers obey any orders in a war based on avenging 9/11 from a government that won't give the full story and won't acknowledge the obvious evidence proving that explosive brought down the Twin Towers and Building 7 on 9/11?
Well, obviously there's people in the United States that may have a different version of what happened during 9/11. I had the opportunity to be watching the television sets when those planes went into those buildings. I also had the opportunity to watch the television sets when that plane went into the Pentagon and attacked some of my friends along with the plane that went into Pennsylvania. I'm somewhat surprised that you think, and you're certainly welcome to your opinion, that's what makes the United States a great country. But, Al-Qaeda said they did it. We saw they did it. And I wouldn't question the fact that they did it. And I think it's our responsibility to hold them responsible for that. And it's our responsibility to make sure that never happens again.
Up next, Steve from
then we can continue to move forward.
Here's John from Davenport, Iowa, Republican line. Good morning. Oh, pushed the wrong button. My apologies. John from Iowa, good morning. Go ahead.
Okay. I have a question here for Mr. Meeks in the vein of transparency. On 9/11, a third tower, Building 7, wasn't hit by a plane, but it fell down symmetrically in 6.5 seconds. Only explosives could have possibly have done that. I'm just wondering if you would be willing to meet with the experts pointing out that scientifically impossible, the impossibility of NIST's explanation for why Building 7 fell, and review the evidence in this controlled demolition.
Well, we've had all the experts. I'm from New York. Nothing devastated me more than what took place on 9/11. I knew individuals that lost their lives in that horrific event, basically, which was tantamount to an act of war as far as I'm concerned. But there is, and I've talked to and I've gone through with all of the experts, and I know a lot of individuals have these different conspiracy theories, etc. And I am convinced that those two planes were the ones that caused the destruction or the death of over 3,000 people in New York on 9/11, that horrific day.
Well, I got you on the topic of New York. Your reaction?
We'll see what happens.
William's up first in Athens, Ohio. Democratic caller. Hi, William.
Hi. Congressman, the evidence that the World Trade Center Building 7 was brought down with explosives on 9/11 is real and proven. And more people are waking up to it every day. How much more trust of the American public does Congress have to lose before it faces reality and acknowledges the need for a new investigation into Building 7's destruction?
I don't think it needs any more investigation. I don't think that. I think the way that those towers were brought down were by radical Islamic terrorists, and that's the way it is. And I think every investigation has shown that so far.
Did you read the 9/11 investigation by the committees?
I did not.
But you think it was adequate enough?
Yeah, I think so.
Richard in Lake Placid, Florida.
for helping those families.
Bert, you're up next in Tampa, Florida, Republican caller.
Okay.
Hi, Bert, go ahead.
Thank you, Congressman. Since you're on the Committee for Science, Space, and Technology, which oversees the National Institute of Standards, why haven't you demanded a real investigation of why Building 7 fell on 9/11? Since NIST in their report admitted the building was in free fall for over 100 feet, when it was destroyed, only pre-planted explosives could have caused that to happen.
Okay. Bert, I want to let the Congressman know that there's an organized group out there that are calling into our show and others to question the investigation of the 9/11 attacks. This group thinking that it wasn't adequate enough from the government.
Well, and I appreciate a lot of people's frustration. I mean, 9/11 was a terrible event, and we saw things happen that we didn't think didn't believe could happen. I don't think any of us thought that those two buildings would fall down. I'm not familiar exactly with what the caller is referring to, but I know a lot of people did a lot of investigation to that. Is there maybe need for some more? I think there could. But building standards, for example, I think become under a constant review as we learn more and more. And I'm sure since 9/11, we begin to learn more and more about how we design buildings to be more terrorist adverse, and that's probably something we should be doing.
David.
Really deal with these issues.
Our first call is from Andrea in Streetsboro, Ohio, Republican line. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Andrea.
Good morning, Mr. Cerati. How are you today?
Doing well, thank you.
Thank you for taking my question. Since this is regarding policy, I had a comment that I first wanted to make. And since physics and common sense have already proven that Building 7 in New York City was brought down with explosives on 9/11, and this is so much the basis for our foreign policy, why should American citizens take government officials and, talking heads who choose to ignore this reality seriously when they push their foreign policy agendas based on this?
Great. Andrea, thank you for your question. And I have to say first, I disagree with the premise of your question, which is that 9/11, the destruction of the World Trade Center, was a so-called inside job done with explosives. There are other studies out there, and it's pretty clear that those buildings were attacked by planes that were hijacked by Al-Qaeda operatives. And, I know that there's a continuing sort of conspiracy theory community out there that thinks that this was, some sort of nefarious scheme to, but it's just hard to take those sort of things seriously. And I know you may genuinely believe it. I encourage you to go out there, engage fully in the debate. I don't really think that the conspiracy theories really hold any water. Thank you.
Maurice from Akron.
Reimbursement for doctors. Greg is up first here for the senator in Kansas City, Missouri, Republican caller. Hi, Greg. Hey, Greg, you're on the air.
Good morning. Good morning.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes. Senator, since there's overwhelming evidence proving that the third tower, which fell on 9/11, which Building 7 was brought down with pre-planted explosives, would you be willing to review the evidence and address the concerns of the over 2,000 architects and engineers demanding a new investigation of Building 7's destruction?
Okay.
I totally missed
his audio faded in and out, but there is a group of people out there that don't think the investigation of the 9/11 terrorist attacks was adequate enough by the federal government. Do you have an opinion about that?
I think we pretty well know what happened there. Listen, I'm always willing to take a look at new evidence, no matter what the what the situation is. I think one of the true roles of the Senate, of the House, is robust oversight of the federal government. But again, from my standpoint, I think we know what happened 9/11, and I'm highly concerned about our national security, which is, of course, part of the problem that the House is dealing with as well. As I know the White House is concerned about readiness in the Defense Department. These threats are real. And so, again, I'm pretty highly sympathetic with people, for example, in armed services that are concerned about the readiness. But again, I'm also, I'm kind of on board with Tom Coburn saying there's plenty of areas of the Defense Department, if it were managed properly, and that's a big if. We really can, I think, have an effective defense that actually addresses the security situations, security issues facing this nation, but in a more cost-effective way.
And you're referring.
So I do think he has a point.
Okay. Will in Illinois, Republican caller. Hi, Will.
Hey, thank you for taking my call. Yeah, Sean, some months ago you were on the program and you were asked about the scientific evidence that Building 7 was brought down with pre-planted explosives on 9/11. You sidestepped the question saying you didn't believe an inside job took down the towers, even though the caller didn't say anything about an inside job. But that said, forget about assigning blame. Would you personally be willing to review the Building 7 controlled demolition evidence with representatives of over 2,000 building experts? Mind you, these are respected architects and engineers, not rabid conspiracy theorists.
Yeah. And Will, this has not been on the top of our list in things we've been dealing with in DC over the last several weeks. But if you have information that you want me to take a look at, shoot me a summary, and sure, we'll take a look at it.
Will is part of a group, we should let you know that, and our viewers, that believe the investigation into the 9/11 attacks was not adequate enough by this government, and so they're organized enough to call into our show and
Well, the
others.
last time I was on, I got a call just like this. So.
Right. We'll go to Gene in